Hello, I'm Casey Aiken, and this is 21 This Week. Coming up next, should MCPS punish students who skip school to attend gun rally? Is the General Assembly a sexual harassment frat house? And did anti-growth members on the County Council send a stay away message to Amazon? Stay tuned. Our panel of insiders will give you the story behind the story. We're joined by the past president of Progressive Maryland, Elbridge James, Secretary of the Maryland Republican Central Committee, Mark Uncapher, Maryland Young Republican National Committeeman, Evan Young, and education activist, Cynthia Rubenstein. Stay tuned for these stories and more on the next 21 This Week. As the Me Too movement gathered momentum earlier this year, predictions that the spotlight of sexual harassment would be turned on the Maryland General Assembly. Initially, efforts by female lawmakers to downplay the allegations of sexual harassment instead had negative, unintended consequences. Cynthia, female staffers felt that the effort to downplay the issue marginalized their concerns. How pervasive is sexual harassment in Annapolis?
Well, evidently it is quite pervasive, and it's been going on for several years. Female lobbyists, female legislative staffers, female legislators have recounted experiences that were definitely unwelcome. And on Monday there was a hearing with 3 legislators who talked about what has happened to them literally at the hands of some creepy
But does unwelcome and inappropriate behavior mean sexual harassment?
It can be. It can also just be unwelcome and inappropriate. Women should not be assumed. It should not be assumed that a woman wants to be touched. It's up to her to have agency over her own physical being and not be touched by a man just assuming that, well, sure, fine, it's fine for me to hug her, it's fine for me to stroke her back and be too familiar.
But aren't we trying to break down the bonds of social behavior that have gone on for thousands and thousands of years? People have hugged and people have touched throughout society.
I know, but this is like the definition of pornography. You cannot always describe it, but you know it when you see it and you feel it. And that's what I think this is.
I want to go to Mark. Mark, State Legislature Cheryl Kagan, a former 21 This Week contributor, alleged an incident of inappropriate touching by former Delegate Gil Ginn, and lobbyist Sarah Love alleged that Delegate Charles E. Barkley made inappropriate physical contact with her in the past. Both Ginn and Barkley have denied the allegations. What's your assessment of how we're dealing with this issue?
Well, I think one of the unfortunate things about the incident alleged by Senator Kagan is it risks trivializing what is a serious issue. She describes an inappropriate touching in a public setting, and I think that should be distinguished from the situation where somebody in a position of power or using more physical intimidation abuses their position as opposed to an inappropriate situation. And I think it's important to separate those things out and to particularly focus on those most egregious examples.
Well, the lines are certainly getting blurred. Elbridge, I want to go to you and talk about a situation that happened locally. A renowned math teacher at Montgomery Blair High School, Eric Wallstein, was accused by hundreds of alumni, that he had sexually harassed and demeaned female students. Wallstein had a 40-year career as a teacher and had garnered multiple prestigious teaching awards, and he has denied the allegations, and none of these allegations were made while he taught school. So what does this say about our society? Are we becoming too sensitive? Are we confusing demanding with demeaning?
The problem we have is that we've ignored these so long that the pendulum is swinging back to a situation where it may seem out of control, but you have to set guidelines. You have to set the precedents. He had a power position, and so therefore his stroking and his touching should never have occurred, or in fact, back in the day, it was allowed. And to the person being touched and stroked or whatever, it was, oh, I can't complain. This is, I need to go along to get along. And that should never have occurred. What we're happening now, especially teaching our young men, the fact is that there's certain behavior, and that's the most critical thing, is teaching our young men that certain behavior is just cannot be tolerated.
Well, but Elbridge, I mean, what I take away from this case with Wallstein is that he not only did he may have rubbed somebody's back, but he was alleged to have been demeaning to some of the students. But if he's a demanding teacher and demands a success from the teacher, sometimes that looks like tough love.
But he's mixing what is appropriate and what is inappropriate. And to the person that is the object, it's the perception. And then the perception of what he or she can do. And right there, they felt helpless. We're talking about a teacher and a student, and a long pattern where the school system has accepted that. In fact, no, let's not go to the school system.
None of this came out while he was teaching.
Society has accepted it.
Evan, I want to go to you in California because I'm still confused by where the line is between appropriate and inappropriate behavior. There's a state senator with the fanciful nickname of Huggy Bear because he greeted everyone with a hug. Now, he was brought up on harassment charges and he was told to stop hugging, even though the reviewing panel determined that his actions weren't sexually intended. Has the Me Too movement gone crazy?
Well, if I ever earned the nickname Huggy Bear, regardless of what I meant by it, that's just going to signal to me I might kind of be a creep and I should just stop. But I think we need to separate the two, like Mark was saying, because someone using their power because they couldn't get a date in high school and now they think they're somebody, so they use their power to hold that over a woman that's subordinate to them, is not the same as I hug people when I see them or I touch their arm when I'm talking to them. And to call that person potentially a sexual harasser, regardless of what truth comes out afterwards, that's going to ruin that person's life. And if there's an allegation against somebody where they're being talked about in the news or on television that they harassed somebody, they assaulted somebody, when they innocently hugged somebody, regardless of what comes out afterwards, that person's always going to be associated with that. And these are serious allegations, so you should have serious proof that someone did something like this before we potentially ruin that person's life. I think the safe line to draw right now, just keep your hands to yourself. I'm just going to wave to everybody from now on. I'm not touching, hugging anybody.
But isn't that the problem? Aren't we destroying the natural societal bonds between men and women here?
No, we're grappling with an ages-old problem that is, as Elbridge says, the pendulum is swinging the other way. And it's going to take a while to form new, mutually agreed upon norms. So this is the messy part of this process where we have to figure this out. But it is high time that women who have felt marginalized and afraid to speak up because they have been subject to people in power over them in these situations.
But the women's movement has been fighting that, and the laws were changed in the 70s, Cynthia. This isn't anything new.
But it's new that we're drawing attention to it. And in fact, there are those who ignored it to their own risk. We know the bad culprits in society. They've been well publicized. And the harm they have done, both to men and to women, with regard to their behavior. So in other words, I may be associated by who I am, or
I want to go to Mark on the left to wrap this up.
But
Mark.
the Me Too movement got started with some really egregious incidents which should have involved or will likely involve criminal prosecution for rape. So
now
again,
we're talking about hugs.
And we should be able to differentiate between the different categories.
You got the last word, Mark. When we come back from the short break, should Baltimore, with a $130 million deficit in school budget, sponsor student protests in Washington? And did the three amigos tell Amazon, we don't want no stinking headquarters here in Montgomery County? Stay tuned. And welcome back. The same week that Amazon reportedly was in the county to review potential sites for its second headquarters, council members Roger Berliner, Tom Hucker, and Mark Elrich conspired to divert funding from the Montrose Parkway, which would have addressed the growing traffic problems near White Flint development site, which, by the way, is under consideration by Amazon. So, Mark, did Hucker, Eldridge, and Berliner hold up a big Amazon go away banner?
I think that's about it, but I think I'd point out that this parkway is at the center of an area of very intense development. The White Flint, whether it's Amazon or something else, is going to be generating more traffic. This is a project that is badly needed in an area where traffic is very much backed up.
Well, Mark, I remember in 2000 when I ran for county council, the issue was to build any part of the Montrose Parkway. The Montrose Parkway East has been delayed for the last 6 years. It seems to me that it's just Montgomery County business as usual, not wanting to go forward on a development project.
Casey, you talked, last time I was here, you talked about a budget deficit and how we needed to cut back on projects and then deciding which projects may have had more validity than other projects. You can't knock county council members for saying maybe this project could wait a little while longer and then the next project could.
Elbridge, I've never met a road project that I didn't like.
I know that.
You know, I like to pave paradise. Cynthia, the three amigos, as they are called, thinks the money should be used for school construction instead. Do they have a point?
Well, look, there's a new wrinkle to this. And in the hearing that took place on Thursday, where the Transportation Committee voted 2-1 to delay this, we found out that this project is on the governor's list of transportation enticements for Amazon HQ2. So that's another reason that they may have felt comfortable with delaying or proposing that it be delayed.
Oh, they were playing a little shell game? Is that what they were trying to do? They think they're real cute doing that?
Well, and I think they also honestly have other priorities, including some other transportation and bike lanes and sidewalk safety projects that they feel are more important, and then it's okay to delay this for 3 years. That's just the way they operate.
Mark.
I think I was going to jump in on that. That was one of the projects they wanted to fund was bike lanes. Now, anybody going up and down 355 in that particular area, bike lanes are not going to solve the congestion problem.
Or Randolph Road and Montrose Park.
I mean,
Montrose Parkway East.
Well, remember, they wouldn't even do a feasibility study for that second Potomac River crossing. So besides Amazon, there's just been some desire to not make commutes more manageable around here.
And here's another point.
Wrap it up. Got 10 seconds.
Whatever happens in the White Flint area, there will be more development. And one of the problems in Montgomery County is that development happens and then the transportation infrastructure to support it lags behind the development. So that is an important consideration. Maybe the reason why Nancy Florine and Ike Leggett are saying keep it on track.
I like that last part. In the aftermath of the shooting at Parkland High School, students across the country have expressed their sentiments in a variety of ways, and school administrators have responded in a variety of ways and to address these issues as well. Evan, Montgomery County students walked out of class in order to support and protest a gun violence. Consequences should have happened, but none did. Is this the right behavior that should be exempted by the school system?
No, because if you allow students to just walk out of school because they feel like it for this reason, then you have to let them walk out of school without consequence when they're going to protest they don't want to eat their vegetables or do their homework. Because anything short of that, if you can walk out of school in the middle of the day for gun violence, then the issue is just the administrators decide there'll be no consequences because we agree with this reason. So either you have rules and you're expected to be in school during the school day, or you can leave to protest whatever you want, whenever you want. But anything in between that, there's just no rules and no standards, and it's up to the principal or the administrator what cause they think is worthy enough to allow you to skip school.
So Elbridge, up in Harford County, the superintendent said, oh, no, you can't walk out of class and go to the big protest next week. We're going to have a module in our school about gun violence. Is that the better way to deal with it?
I want to say no on that, but I'll just say no on that. And you're trivializing the point. This is not about vegetables. This is about our safety. This is about children
it's
and children and our families.
Can protest after
Our
school's
families supported this. our families support the fact that our students are now taking a civic responsibility and voicing a need for civic action.
Have your parents write you a note.
I applaud the fact is that these students get in the classroom and the teachers in those classrooms will be talking about this. And in fact, we'll be moving this whole issue forward. A day of protest is not going to kill anyone, but a day of civic responsibility, which this was, will lead to more dialogue and hopefully better action.
Mark, go ahead.
So, Elbridge, would you be okay then if kids took off without consequences from MCPS to say go down to Washington to a pro-life march?
To be honest with you, yes.
Okay. Well, that's
At
equivalent.
least
Yes.
consistent.
Yes.
Well, so Mark, let's talk about that, because up in Baltimore, that's exactly what the mayor, Catherine Pugh, has decided to do. She's going to hire 60 buses to take students to Washington, D.C. for the gun protest next week, even though the Baltimore school system has a $130 million deficit. In all due respect to Elbridge, when did it become the job of the mayor and school administrators to teach civic activism?
I don't know what the worst part about this is. It's kind of on multiple levels. Baltimore is a city with the worst murder rate. It is worse than New York, although it has more than 10 times the population, largely the function of the illegal guns. So let's agree on something. Get illegal guns off the street. Part of the problem in Baltimore is not the laws, because we have a lot of laws in Maryland on guns, but what the issue is the inability of the Baltimore police to effectively get guns off the street that are
But do
illegal.
you not understand this opportunity in Baltimore is to help engage our students? What the city is saying, the fact is that we understand that there is a problem with guns, illegal or whatever. If I have students that turn around now and become more conscious of their responsibility with the managing of that whole gun problem,
Elbridge,
you could have
in
great
all
things
due respect,
happen.
listen, we've got a dropout problem in our schools. We got a graduation problem in our schools, and we have students that aren't learning in our schools. The job of the schools is to teach them to be able to be productive members of society.
I agree.
And telling them, oh, go ahead and march because the government can't do something or is going to do something for you is the wrong answer.
This is not
They
civic.
can't
This
read
is
and
not
write.
a civic lesson.
Why don't you teach them to read and write
this
first?
is a civic lesson?
Well, in
Cynthia.
Baltimore, they can't even get
All
the
right.
heaters turned
This-
on. They can find
I
buses.
agree with Elbridge. This is an opportunity for a civics lesson in real life. It's an opportunity to engage students in giving voice to a relevant issue that they face every day. Why would you not want this as a experiential classroom and a civics lesson? Remember, the civil rights era was largely driven. This is social studies.
They're not learning to read and write, Cynthia.
This is social studies and government.
How are they going to be productive in
I think you
society
have to grab
if they
this
can't read and write?
opportunity.
Mark.
Remember, the civil rights era was
Exactly.
largely driven by young people.
Isn't that a terrible
But this
thing?
is blame shifting on the part of the mayor for the failure of her administration to be able to address the violence in Baltimore. Because other large cities have succeeded where Baltimore has not.
This may be a step for her to grab hold of a situation and turn the conversation to that. We do not know. We're down here. They're up in Baltimore, and they're responding to an issue.
let's talk about it. Next week, there's going to be a big gun protest in Washington, D.C., and students from Montgomery County are going to walk out of their classes and go to it. Should there be consequences? Go ahead. You're thinking. Don't take too long.
I will say,
No.
I'm glad that these students from Baltimore are going down for this, because getting them out of Baltimore, it'll be the safest they've been in a while. So,
Mark, should there be consequences when the little urchins cut class next week?
Well, I think that there are consequences, that they're going to have a less effective education than they would otherwise. And I think that's one of the more serious ones, is being trapped in the Baltimore schools. We're talking about MCPS, but the consequence is that you're not going to get as much out of your education.
Cynthia.
It's one day, and it's a huge issue. And I still
Thank you.
say this is a living civics lesson. This is an opportunity for students to learn on the ground what it means to be an active, advocating citizen.
This takes kids out
I'm
of
gonna
their
wrap.
shell.
We got to wrap.
and
We got
put
to
them in the
wrap.
real
We got to
world.
wrap
We need
this up.
Tide Pods
And,
to
and
watch.
and just for the record, I was joking when I said that called them little urchins. Stay tuned for parting shots when we come back from this short break. And welcome back. Now with parting shots, Mark Uncapher.
A week ago Sunday, Senator Wayne Norman, a senator in the Maryland legislature, died unexpectedly at age 62 through an unusual set of circumstances because of the way the election law. None of the delegates who were serving with him were able to be designated to run as replacement, so somebody else has been nominated. The expectation is that in the next couple of days that his wife will be designated, Linda will be designated to serve for the balance of his term. Our thoughts and prayers go out to Senator Norman's family.
Thank you, Mark. Evan Young, your parting shot.
So in January, Maryland Attorney General Brian Frosch said he did not have adequate resources to combat the opioid epidemic in Maryland. In February, apparently, though, he had the resources to sue the Trump administration over a tax cut that cuts taxes for 71% of Marylanders. And despite the cap on salt taxes, would be, according to the Democrat comptroller, more than offset by the increase in standard deduction and child tax credit. So I hope when everyone votes in November, they remember our Attorney General's priorities are more against hating Donald Trump than more money in Marylanders' pockets.
Thank you. Cynthia Rubenstein, your parting shot.
Okay, so this week the Teachers Union, also known as MCEA, has started to parse out endorsements for countywide races, and they, out of a field of 38 contenders for the at-large seats, they chose 3. Brandy Brooks, who works for Progressive Maryland, Will Jawando, who has run for office before and has an incredible story, as well as Chris Wilhelm, who's an MCPS teacher. And they are holding incumbents' feet to the fire in district races as well as at large to see what happens with the budget.
Thank you. Elbridge James, your parting shot.
My parting shot is a personal one, and it has to do with health care in this country. I've been blessed to have a new drug that has cleared up my skin and just revitalized my whole outlook on life. And I do appreciate the medical industry and the good work doctors and scientists are doing.
Thank you, Elbridge. So since you're talking about medical things, I'm going to share a shocking story that I read in the newspaper with the audience. And it doesn't involve President Donald Trump at all. It involves a young rugby player who was larking about, as his mother said, who decided on a dare to eat a slug. Now, the slug had a parasitic worm in it that got into his brain, and he's now a quadriplegic. So make sure that you are careful about what you eat and those bets that you make, and make sure that you're not drinking too much lager when you're making the larking about, because you could have some terrible consequences. For 21 this week, I want to thank you all for being here on that cheery note, right? For 21 this week, I'm Casey Aiken.